Hello and thanks for joining me. I'm out today on my Triumph Scrambler 1200. It's a bitterly cold day. The light's very funny, so it'll be interesting to see what it comes out like with the camera. I'm doing something I don't do very often today, and that is I'm heading south of the River Tyne. So I'm just heading down the A19. I'm going to go through the Tyne Tunnel underneath the River Tyne. Yeah, as I say, I don't go south very often because we all know it's bandit country once you get south of the Tyne. But anyway, I'm going down to Durham, just doing a few errands. I'm actually going to pick up some engineering tools down in Durham. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to do another video blog. And what I want to talk about today is motorcycles in movies. Now, what spurred me onto this was the other night I was feeling quite tired and I just thought, I'll just kick back and watch a film. I don't have a television, but I just watch films on my computer, which I don't do very often. So I don't have Netflix, but I do have an Amazon account. So I went onto Amazon Prime and I was having a flick through, and I ended up switching it off because I couldn't find anything I wanted to watch. But I was looking through the movie descriptions, and I can't even remember the name of the film, but there was some film about, it was an American film about some ex-serviceman, military type, comes home to his hometown and finds it's been taken over by a gang of bikers, so presumably puts them all straight. And I thought, just another cliched movie in which bikers are a lazy metaphor for evil, antisocial forces that the protagonist can fight and overcome. And I just thought there's so many, I say lazy, negative images of motorcycles and motorcyclists like this. And it just made me think about, more generally, about how bikes and bikers are portrayed in movies, and whether they're portrayed positively or negatively. And the reality is, actually, there's quite a lot of positive portrayals of motorcycles and bikers in movies. So it got me thinking, and so rather than watching some crappy film, I got onto the internet and started just going into the Tyne Tunnel here, just heading into the tunnel. Takes me under the River Tyne. I love riding through this tunnel on my Harley. The exhaust resonates beautifully. Anyway, that's very childish. But anyway, so I got onto bikers and movies. Let's get back to the plot. I got onto the internet and I started researching about films that had motorcycles in them, in a prominent way and featured in a prominent way. And being something of a sociologist, professionally that is, I took an interest in this and started having a look, and it's very interesting. So I'm going to try and keep this brief, but sort of plot over time the different ways that bikes are portrayed in movies. It's very interesting. Well, at least I find it very interesting. So if we go right back to the early days of film, the early days of cinema, so cinema came in at the end of the 1800s. Not long after cinema started, we had our first bike film in 1905. And it was about somebody went off on a bike on a bit of an adventure, ended up having a misadventure. So it's very interesting that actually, right in the very early days of cinema, film directors were using bikes as a main feature, and there were quite a few bike films in those early days. And interestingly, many of them featured women riders. So back in those days, they motorcycles were not associated with a macho male image at all, and many of those films had female riders, as I said. Then going through the days of the silent movies up to the early talkies, most of the films seemed to, if they portrayed motorcyclists, they were policemen. Police rode bikes, so the police presence in any film, and a lot of these were comedy films, the main bikes you saw were police bikes and policemen on bikes. But generally speaking, in those early films, the role of bikes and the way bikes were portrayed were as fun and an adventure, and it was a very positive image. And obviously, police, there's a very positive image back in those days, and it was a vehicle for adventure and fun, and for both sexes. So, very interesting looking at those early films. Then we get through to the 1950s, and of course, what happened in the 1950s is we had Hollister, the infamous events at Hollister, which I've talked about in another video, and I'll put a link to that. I've talked about in that a lot more detail in another video. And of course that then led on to the film The Wild One, which was supposedly based on the events at Hollister, and then that sort of set the precedent then for bikes and bikers to be portrayed as antisocial and violent, and a threat to social norms, particularly in that post-Second World War era in America, where it was the Cold War and the commie under the bed, and anything which threatened the social values of America then was seen in very negative terms. That then obviously led through to the 1960s, and that was kind of the heyday of the biker movies, if you like, what they call the biker exploitation movies, and there were lots of them. And again, they were all sort of portrayed as antisocial, a lot of violence, drug taking, gratuity, free living, free sex in an era when that wasn't so socially acceptable. But I think the film that kind of changed that somewhat was Easy Rider. That was released in 1969, because that was not really portraying bikers as violent. It was more a association with freedom and escape from the very restrictive social norms of the time. But of course, it was a film that was associated with drugs and drug use and sort of generally socially dropping out. Then coming to sort of more recent era, it's interesting to see how in more modern films, motorcycles have been portrayed for very specific reasons. So I'm going to take two different films. For example, Officer and a Gentleman with Richard Gere, and then Top Gun with Tom Cruise. I would suggest in both of those films, both of those characters rode motorcycles, and that motorcycle was used as a prop to portray or to define those characters in a certain way. I can't talk about bikes and movies and bikers without mentioning the Fonz, of course, in Happy Days. That was a very positive portrayal of bikers. But if you look at more recent movies, motorcycles have been used to create exciting chase sequences. So, for example, if you think The Matrix, there's some very, very good motorcycle chasers in those, and the good guys and the bad guys riding motorcycles. I would say, before films like that, it was generally, there was still that kind of menace there. If you think some of the earlier James Bond films, James Bond was, if he's being chased, quite often it was by some baddie on a motorcycle. Whereas if you look at The Matrix and then John Wick 3, excellent motorcycle chase scenes in there. So we have films there where the heroes are riding bikes. Makes them seem more exciting, and of course it creates very exciting scenes. And of course, on that note, if we have a look at other notable films in which motorcycles are portrayed, again, it's about creating an exciting scene. So some iconic ones, obviously The Great Escape. The Great Escape. With the jump, Steve McQueen on the drive. Totally gratuitous in relation to the rest of the film, but it created an exciting sequence there. Arnie in Terminator as well, on his Harley Fat Boy. Again, just it portrayed some of the kind of image of the character there and created a very exciting chase scene. The more recent James Bond with Daniel Craig, of course, we've got the Triumph Scrambler, like the one I'm riding at the moment, and again that created a bit, set piece. James Bond films are really about those set pieces, and that fantastic stunt jump, that huge jump on the Triumph Scrambler. But it's interesting in those kind of more recent films. It's not just about the biker and the biker image. There's definitely an element of product placement in there as well, and Triumph are clearly working there to very heavy product placement, which they have then obviously followed up with their special edition 007 scramblers that you can buy. And another film which I watched recently for I don't know about the 8th time was Mad Max Fury Road, and again some fantastic motorcycle stunts in that film, and some wonderful chase sequences. So yeah, that was just a very quick run through the way bikes and bikers are portrayed in movies, and it's very interesting to see how that has changed over time. I hope you found that interesting and maybe a little bit thought-provoking. There's some great films to see with bikes in them. Okay, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully see you again soon. Bye.